Hey, everybody. Okay, so let's get into. I'm going to try to be a little more organized here so that way I don't ramble and repeat myself. I know that's going to be a hard task for me, but there's some things I thought about. I'm just going to kind of go through it, and I think we'll read a brief item from none other than, excuse me, from Monsieur Bernays. We're going to go back to Bernays because he was a prolific writer. He did a lot of work, obviously. He was like 104 when he died. So, yeah, he put in his work. The guy was a professional. But nonetheless, let me start with this. Speaking about propaganda a little bit and talk about Bernays. What would change in terms of the landscape if Fox News, or let's just say the Fox Corporation, which of course, let's bring it back a little bit here before I delve into that. So Fox was named after, of course, Edward Fox. And I know, yes, he was Jewish. We're just going to skip over that. And what we're going to, further than that, it just became another Hollywood studio. That's where, that's where it came from. And then, of course, once TV became a thing and they had all this property, had all these properties, of course, from the golden age of Hollywood, this and that. So they became a TV studio. And, of course, you have The Simpsons, of course, still on, Bob's Burgers and all that business. And, of course, then you had, Roger Ailes, who, of course, started Fox News. And they had Fox Business News and all that business. But I asked that, just a brief outline of that. What would happen if tomorrow Fox News disappeared? It's a little thought experiment for y'all. What would happen if it disappeared? And of course, we're talking about the Fox Corporation in general. Not only, Fox, that produced such shows as Bones, but also, there was no Fox News. There was no evil Bill O'Reilly, now who's, of course, doing his own little podcast thing for boomers. And, of course, no Tucker Carlson and all that, Well, Tucker Carlson would still be a liberal, probably. He would still be, he'd still be on CNN with his bow tie. Who knows? Or maybe he'd be on CNN. What would happen? What would happen to the world? If Fox News ended tomorrow, if they just declared bankruptcy and they kind of, everyone went, they made their choice, Ainsley Harriott would have to go would have to, maybe shift her policies and become more of a liberal on CNN or, I don't know. Tucker Carlson, of course, had burned his bridges with CNN and MSNBC and all the others. So he would probably have a podcast or something like that. And, who knows? Who knows? I mean, he'd probably, maybe he'd have Richard Spencer as a guest. I don't know. Probably not. I think he's a little smarter than that. But what would happen? You have to think about it. Because, of course, everyone from, so-called, progressives today, up through, your Marxist, Leninists, and anarchists, they still blame Fox News and people, of course, like Tucker Carlson. They have a hate boner for people like him. I mean, Tucker Carlson, to me, he says a lot of base things, but I think to me is that ultimately he's a pragmatist. He's a pragmatist. He's somebody that, will say what's ever popular. So it's just something to think about. What else did I have on this little list here? So the future reads. I'm going to tell y'all. I do see about a third of a way through, I would say. Reading through Christopher Lasch, Revolt of the Elites. So I am going to go through that book. I know that's going to be a heck of a thing, but I'm going to restart recording that on Monday. And I'll kind of go through that a little bit. I keep on saying those types of things, but I just, just so lazy and everything else. But anyway, so that'll be a future read to go through. And there are so many other books I'll go through. I'm going to have to pick through and kind of decide. I'm not going to go over every Christopher Lasch book. I have 3 of his books. I found that 3 is a pretty good number. because I got 3 books of Bernays. I have 3 books of. I don't have 3 books of Thomas Sowell, but that's kind of meh, you know. But anyway, I do have a few different books that I could go through. I've actually got a book coming about Marcus Garvey, which I may do a video about, because obviously there's a lot of folks who are, of course, talking about Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter is pretty much has been co-opted. It was co-opted, you know, just after, I think, the Ferguson riots and everything else, you know, I can't remember. Well, I'm not going to say that, but but I think after all this trouble that's happened, people wonder where BLM is, you know. As I said already, people like D. Ray McKesson have been accepted by, you know, the establishment. How can this guy who was a protester and is fighting for the little guy, fighting for, you know, the average black man and woman, is now writing for GQ magazine? That doesn't really make any sense to me. So it's kind of one of those things, in my view, of just how fickle things are. But I think what I'm going to do, folks, is I think I've covered pretty much how I'm going to. Oh yeah, let me add one other little thing here before I get into the reading that I was going to do. It's a short reading. It's about 8 pages, which is just talking about how people evolve. I think that there's a point. It depends on, you know, it's obviously different for everybody, but I think that there's a point where you realize that you're not cool and that, you know, you're kind of stuck in your ways, and you say, you know, I don't really want to concern myself with what goes on with today's music. It's like I'll kind of pay attention here and there for people, you know, that's interesting. You know, it's like, you know, reading about that Doja Cat or whatever, you know, the one that you know, the light-skinned girl who, of course, was accused of talking to alt-right, you know, Nazis and everything else. I was like, okay, oh, that Doja Cat, okay, nah, you know. But other than that, in general, pop culture just kind of becomes secondary. You're just kind of like, you kind of learn the cadence of how these folks talk. You learn the cadence of the questions and everything else and the times, and then you just kind of like, it's boring. So, you know, then you kind of go into being a Spurg like I have, and you've entered into, you know, maybe I'm a bit of a late bloomer in this way, but the idea that, you know, now we're going to study about the depths of politics. It's easy to talk about, oh, well, let's talk about D-Day. It's like, kind of bored of that. I spent quite a bit of my life, you know, researching that. It's like, okay, you can talk about, okay, yeah, the invasion could have happened on the 5th, but it was delayed because of weather. And then, of course, you know, you can talk about Operation Mulberry. You can talk about, you know, Omaha Beach wasn't as heavily bombarded as other places, or it wasn't as effective as opposed to, you know, Gold Sword and Juno. And of course, they still encountered some resistance. But anyway, you know, overall, it just kind of gets boring talking about those battles. There are a lot of great people that do that, but I think that, to me, I moved on from a lot of that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and share the screen here. And we're going to go over a short thing. We're going to go back to Bernays. We're going to go back to Bernays, ladies and gentlemen. I know that y'all are so excited about that, but I think we will. We'll go back to Bernays and read a little bit of that here. Oh, yeah, I forgot I just downloaded today Pytel, the National Bolshevist Manifesto. I have it on one of those thumb drives, but I'm not going to worry about reading that right now. Bernays, Manipulating Public Opinion. Where is it? Educating Unions. There's it. Yeah, Bernays, 1947. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. Okay. There we are. Does it come up? Click on it hard enough? Okay. Here we go. Okay. So let's read through this here. This is, this is 8 pages. This is pretty short. So we'll kind of go through this here, and we'll critique it a little bit, but I think most importantly, we'll just see how it kind of works today. So, the engineering of consent. Freedom of speech and its democratic corollary, a free press have tacitly expanded our Bill of Rights to include the right of persuasion. This development was an inevitable result of the expansion of the media of free speech and persuasion, defined in other articles in this volume. All these media provide open doors to the public mind. Any one of us through these media may influence the attitudes and actions of our fellow citizens. Yes, that's true. The tremendous expansion of communications in the United States has given this nation the world's most penetrating and effective apparatus for the transmission of ideas. Every resident is constantly exposed to the impact of our vast network of communications, which reach every corner of the country, no matter how remote or isolated. Words hammer continually at the eyes and ears of America. The United States has become a small room in which a single whisper is magnified thousands of times. Good alliteration there. Knowledge of how to use this enormous amplifying system becomes a matter of primary concern to those who are interested in socially constructive action. The two main divisions of this communication system which maintain social cohesion. On the first level, there are commercial media. The commercial media, almost 1,800 daily newspapers in the United States, have a combined circulation of around 44 million. There are approximately 10,000 weekly newspapers and almost 6,000 magazines. Of course, now most of that is online. And even though a lot of those places have been cut down, where it's just a few things here and there. Approximately 2,000 radio stations of various types broadcast to the nation's 60 million receiving sets. Approximately 16,500 motion picture houses have a capacity of almost 10,500,000. A deluge of books and pamphlets is published annually. Okay. On the second level, there are the specialized media owned and operated by the many organized groups in this country. Almost all such groups and many of their subdivisions have their own communication systems. They disseminate ideas not only by means of the formal written word and labor papers, house organs, special bulletins, and the like, but also through lectures, meetings, discussions, and rank-and-file conversations. Leadership through communication. This web of communications, sometimes duplicating, crisscrossing, and overlapping, is a condition of fact, not theory. We must recognize the significance of modern communications not only as a highly organized mechanical web, but as a potent force for social good or possible evil. We can determine whether this network shall be employed to its greatest extent for sound social ends. For only by mastering the techniques of communication can leadership be exercised fruitfully in the vast complex that is the modern democracy in the United States. In an earlier age, society that was small geographically and with a more homogeneous population. Did he say homogeneous population? Oh my goodness, he's a Wignat-ree. Just saying. Hate to say that, but once again, we have to be, if he said that today, a homogeneous population, what? People like Vosh would be, kvetching and ready to fall over on his, fall over on his side so that his cat can lick him on the face. Homogeneous population, sorry. Well done, sir. But yeah, communication, a leader who is known for his followers personally. There was a visual relationship between them. Communication was accomplished principally by a personal announcement to an audience, or through a relatively primitive printing press. Books, pamphlets, and newspapers reach a very small, literate segment of the public. We are tired of hearing repeated threadbare cliche. The world has grown smaller, but this so-called truism is not actually true by any means. The world has grown both smaller and very much larger. Its physical frontiers have been expanded. Today's leaders have become more remote physically from the public. Yet, at the same time, the public has much greater familiarity with these leaders through the system of modern communications. Leaders are just as potent today as ever. In turn, by use of this system, which has constantly expanded as a result of technological improvement, leaders have been able to overcome the problems of geographical distance and social stratification to reach their publics. Underlying much of this expansion, and largely the reason for its existence in its present form, has been widespread and enormously rapid diffusion of literacy. Leaders may be the spokesman for many different points of view. They may direct the activities of major organized groups such as industry, labor, or units of government. They may compete with one another in battles for public goodwill, or they may, representing divisions within the larger units, compete among themselves. Such leaders, with the aid of technicians in the field who have specialized in utilizing the channels of communication, have been able to accomplish purposefully and scientifically what we have termed the engineering of consent. Ah, yes. This is something that Parenti wrote about, and then basically Chomsky did a Jay-Z basically, and X'd his name out and put Jigga on top, and and said, "Yeah, this is my work." Apparently, I mean, so I've heard. I haven't read everything of Parenti, obviously, but that's hard knock life there for those that want to know. Yeah. So I X your name out, put Jigga on top. Dude, it's a hard knock life. Anyway, just letting y'all know just to let y'all know I'm a millennial by saying that. Anyway, so what else? The term engineering of consent. Rah. The phrase quite simply means the use of an engineering approach, that is, action based only on thorough knowledge of the situation and on the application of scientific principles and tried practices to the task of getting people to support ideas and programs. Any person or organization depends ultimately on public approval and is therefore faced with the problem of engineering the public's consent to a program or goal. We expect our elected government officials to try to engineer our consent through the network of communications open to them for the measures they propose. We reject government authoritarianism or regimentation, but we are willing to take action supported by us by the written or spoken word. The engineering of consent is the very essence of the democratic process, the freedom to persuade and suggest, the freedoms of speech, press, petition, and assembly. The freedoms which make the engineering of consent possible are amongst the most cherished guarantees of the Constitution of the United States. The engineering of consent should be based theoretically and practically on the complete understanding of those whom it attempts to win over. But it is sometimes impossible to reach joint decisions based on an understanding of facts by all the people. The average American adult has only 6 years of schooling behind him. It's even worse today, yeah. With pressing crises and decisions to be faced, a leader frequently cannot wait for the people to arrive at even general understanding. In certain cases, democratic leaders must play their part in leading the public through the engineering of consent to socially constructive goals and values. The role naturally imposes upon them the obligation to use the educational processes as well as other available techniques to bring about as complete an understanding as possible. Under no circumstances should the engineering of consent supersede or displace the functions of the educational system, either formal or informal, in bringing about the understanding by the people as a basis for their education. The engineering of consent often does supplement the educational process. If higher general educational standards were to prevail in this country and the general level of public knowledge and understanding were raised as a result, this approach would retain its value. Even in a society of a perfectionist educational standard, equal progress would not be achieved in every field. Absolutely true. There would be time lags, blind spots, and points of weakness, and the engineering of consent would still be essential. The engineering of consent will always be needed as an adjunct to or a partner of the educational process. Importance of engineering consent. Today, it is impossible to overestimate the importance of engineering consent. It affects almost every aspect of our daily lives. When used for social purposes, it is among our most valuable contributions to the efficient functioning of modern society. The techniques can be subverted. Demagogues can utilize the techniques for anti-democratic purposes with as much success, as can those who employ them for socially desirable ends. The responsible leader, to accomplish social objectives, must therefore be constantly aware of the possibilities of subversion. He must apply his energies to mastering the operational know-how of consent engineering and to outmaneuvering his opponents in the public interest. It is clear that a leader in a democracy need not always possess the personal qualities of a Daniel Webster or a Henry Clay. He need not be visible or even audible to his audiences. He may lead indirectly simply by effectively using today's means of making contact with the eyes and ears of those audiences. Even the direct, or what might be called the old-fashioned methods of speaking to an audience, is for the most part once removed. For usually public speech is transmitted mechanically through the mass media of radio, motion pictures, and television. During World War I, the famous Committee on Public Information, organized by George Creel, dramatized in the public consciousness the effectiveness of the war of words. The committee helped to build the morale of our own people to win over the neutrals and to disrupt the enemy. It helped to win that war. But by comparison with the enormous scope of the world warfare in World War II, the Committee on Public Information used primitive tools to do an important job. The Office of War Information alone probably broadcast more words over its shortwave facilities during the war than were written by all of George Creel's staff. Yep, that's when radio took over. You had, people like Ernie Pyle, this and that, who were, very much influential to showing that. And, of course, you had pictures that are still used today, such as the second Iwo Jima flag raising. For those that know, just a brief bit of history here. For those that don't know, the original Iwo Jima flag raising was already shown and wasn't as influential. So they had the second flag raising, which became more iconic. And of course, like I said, that wasn't Ernie Pyle, I don't think, but that was a famous photographer who took that. And of course, as a side note, of course, most of those Marines died in the later battles of on Iwo Jima. And the only one that did survive, of course, was Ira Hayes, who was a broken man and ultimately died in a pile of his own vomit. Very sad. But anyway, I just want to show off for a little bit and pretend like I know. If nothing else, it's there to keep my mind going. Okay, anywho. As this approach came to be recognized as the key factor in influencing public thought, thousands of experts in many related fields came to the foray. Such specialists as editors, publishers, advertising men, heads of pressure groups, and political parties, educators, and publicists. During World War I, the immediate post-war years, a new profession developed in response to the demand for trained, skilled specialists to advise others on the technique of engineering public consent, a profession providing counsel on public relations. The professional viewpoint. In 1923, I defined the profession in my book, Crystallizing Public Opinion, and in the same year, at New York University, gave the first course on the subject. In the almost quarter century that has elapsed since then, the profession has become a recognized one in this country and has spread to other democratic countries where free communication, competition of ideas in the marketplace of ideas. Oh boy, once again, I guess you need to go back to good old Bernays, folks. So lefties, progressives, if you want to use the meme of marketplace of ideas, you need to look back to people like Edward Bernays, not just libertarians and everything else. Okay. The profession has its literature, its training courses, an increasing number of practitioners, and a growing recognition of social responsibility. In the United States, the profession deals specifically with the problems of relationship between a group and its public. Its chief function is to analyze objectively and realistically. Oops, sorry, did I go? Yeah, I went too far. Sorry. Okay. I'm just going to skip over some stuff. Okay, it must be remembered, of course, that goodwill, the base of lasting adjustment, can be preserved in the long run only by those actions warranted, whose actions warranted. But this does not prevent those who do not deserve goodwill from winning it and holding on to it long enough to do a lot of damage. The Public Relations Council has a professional responsibility to push only those ideas he can respect and not to promote causes or accept assignments for clients he considers antisocial. Just as a civil engineer must analyze every element of the situation before he builds a bridge, so the engineer of consent, in order to achieve a worthwhile social objective, must operate from a foundation of soundly planned action. Let's assume that he is engaged in a specific task. His plans must be based on four prerequisites: calculation of resources, both human and physical, i.e. manpower, the money, and the time available for the purpose. 2. A thorough knowledge of the subject as possible. 3. Determination of objectives subject to possible change after research, specifically what is to be accomplished, with whom, and through whom. 4. Research of the public to learn why and how it acts both individually and as a group. Only after this preliminary groundwork has been firmly laid is it possible to know whether the objectives are realistically attainable. Only then can the engineer of consent utilize his resources of manpower, money, and time, and media available. Strategy, organization, and activities will be geared to the realities of the situation. The task must first be related to the budget available for manpower and mechanics. In terms of human assets, the consent engineer has certain talents: creative, administrative, executive, and he must know what these are. He should also have a clear knowledge of his limitations. The human assets need to be implemented by workspace and office equipment. All material needs must be provided by the budget. Above all else, once the budget has been established and before a first step is taken, the field of knowledge dealing with the subject should be thoroughly explored. This is primarily a matter of collecting and codifying a store of information so that it will be available for practical, efficient use. This preliminary work may be tedious and exacting, but it cannot be bypassed, for the engineer of consent should be powerfully equipped with facts, with truths, with evidence, before he begins to show himself before a public. The consent engineer should provide himself with the standard reference books on public relations, publicity, opinion. And we're just going to skip over all that feijoa and let's get down to here. Okay. At this point in the preparatory work, the engineer of consent should consider the objectives of his activity. He should have clearly in mind at all times precisely where he is going and what he wishes to accomplish. He may intensify already existing favorable attitudes. He may induce those holding favorable attitudes to take constructive action. He may convert disbelievers. He may disrupt certain antagonistic points of view. Goals should be defined exactly. In a Red Cross drive, for example, a time limit and the amount of money to be raised are set from the start. Much better results are obtained in a relief drive when the appeal is made for aid to the people of a specific country or locality rather than of a general area such as Europe or Asia. Studying the public. The objectives must be at all times be related to the public whose consent is to be obtained. The public is people, but what do they do now? What are their present attitudes towards the situation which the consent engineer is concerned? What are the impulses which govern these attitudes? What areas are the people ready to absorb? What are they ready to do, given an effective stimulant? This can be used in the idea of Black Lives Matter and these and how they are organized on Facebook and everything else. What are they ready to do next? Of course, a lot of it, there is some organization behind it, but it appears that, it's kind of, they are trying to change the image. They have, definitely had an image problem the last week with all the fires and everything else. Now they're trying to make a more coherent image and portray more things to be less violent. Okay. What is the flow? Flow of ideas from whom to whom? To what extent do authority, factual evidence play a part? Huh. Okay, we're going to start skipping through this here. The Raiders of the New Republic. Trade Union or Unity Club. Okay, there we go. Look at this. This is a lot of good stuff here. But I feel like y'all don't want me to read through everything, do you? Okay. Well, you know what? I'll try to read through. How about I do that? I just wanted to check and make sure. Okay. To be successful, the themes must appeal to the motives of the public. Motives are the activation of both conscious and subconscious pressures created by the force of desire. Psychologists have isolated a number of compelling appeals, the validity of which has been repeatedly proved in practical application. Once the themes are established, in what kind of campaign are they to be used? The situation may call for a blitzkrieg or oh boy, we're going to use lightning war? Okay. Yowza. And he wrote this. Okay, this is 1947. Woo! Using blitzkrieg. I don't know why I'm so shocked by that, but it's just like, oh, really? Lightning war. Okay. Once again, it may be necessary to develop a plan or plan of action for an election that will be over in a few weeks or months, or for a campaign that may take years, such as the effort to cut down the tuberculosis death. This is something that Bernays is very good at. That's pretty obvious, but he balances things out where he will talk about he knows that people are going to say, oh, well, how dare you talk about a political campaign and how corruption, the corruption that goes on in politics, this and that. But then, of course, he says things like, or as, such as the effort to cut down tuberculosis death rate. Same thing where he's talking about, child literacy or, child mortality rates going down. He's very good at balancing these things out. So people have to be a little bit more complicated. They can't just make a sweeping dive towards him and just say, well, he was just, very clever. Very clever. Nonetheless, planning for mass persuasion is governed by many factors that can call upon one's powers to training, experience, skill, and judgment. Planning should be flexible and provide for changed conditions. When the plans have been perfected, organizations of resources follows, and it must be undertaken in advance to provide the necessary manpower, money, and physical equipment. We're going to skip over to this other. Okay. Primarily, however, the engineer of consent must create news. News is not an innate, inanimate thing. It is an overt act that makes news, and news in turn shapes the attitudes and actions of people. A good criterion as to whether something is or is not news is whether the event juts out of the pattern of routine. The developing of events and circumstances that are not routine is one of the basic functions of the engineer of consent. Events so planned can be projected over the communication systems to infinitely more people than those actually participating, and such events vividly dramatize ideas for those who do not witness the events. The imaginatively managed event can compete successfully with other events for attention. Newsworthy events involving people usually do not happen by accident. They are planned deliberately to accomplish a purpose, to influence our ideas and actions. Events may also be set up in chain reaction by harnessing the energies of group leaders. The engineer of consent can simulate them to set in motion activities of their own. They will organize additional specialized subsidiary events, all of which will further dramatize the basic theme. Communication is the key to engineering consent for social action, but it is not enough to get out leaflets and bulletins or mimeograph machines, to place releases in newspapers, or to fill the airwaves with radio talks. Words, sounds, and pictures accomplish little unless they are tools of a soundly thought out plan and carefully organized methods. Once again, this goes back to what is going on with these riots. You can have all the images of fires and all the I can't breathe and all this stuff, but there is no thought out plan here. Not necessarily. There's not a thought out plan. Is that once again, it has been co-opted. So what they have done is they have told the police, they have told the military, hey, why don't you go ahead and, go down on one knee and start kneeling and say, we're sorry, we're sorry. And once again, what have we seen? We have seen a lot of the very naive and the gullible people who are falling for it, and they're saying, "Oh my gosh, of course! Oh, well, the cops and police are still with us." And we have seen these aspects also from people like Beau the Fifth Column, have we not? And we have seen him for what he is, and that he'll still talk about the military, where he says Sergeant Major of the Army is God. No, that's fei hua. You ask anyone, if you ask any person who has been in the United States Army, who is an NCO at any level, and say that they see the Sergeant Major of the Army as God, they would laugh, and then they would just be angry, I would imagine. But anyway, I'm just using this to try to connect with today. Anyway, if the plans are well formulated and the proper use is made of them, the ideas conveyed by the words will become part and parcel of the peoples themselves. When the public is convinced of the soundness of an idea, it will proceed to action. There's no set idea necessarily. There's no set idea. And they've talked about, and the idea has been set out where they're basically going to talk about, defunding the police in Minneapolis. So far, that's not necessarily a sound idea. It isn't, because there are plenty of other things that go on. Who is going to, are you going to, once again, it's just going to be privatized. I saw that someone, I guess the redo of what is it going to turn into? It's just going to be more privatization. All those things that the left should be against, they are helping to create. They, once again, like I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm going to repeat myself here, so just to say. But this idea that you have these, these protests going on. There is no sound idea. There is no clear message as to what is going on here. These plans are not well formulated. You are going to give, the powers that be, the capitalists and everything else. You're going to give the mayor and everything else, and what these private security companies want, which is now privatized forces. We've heard this idea, of course, that police, they recruit for police amongst the Ku Klux Klan and white power and everything else. Now you're not going to have any police. So people are just going to be shot. And now you're going to have gangs running the situation. If that's what you want, okay. But that's my view of things. Prove me wrong. I say this in almost every video. Prove me wrong. And maybe life will prove me wrong, but that's what I see, is that privatization is going to occur more and more. Whether it's with, water, whether it's going to be with, law enforcement, this and that. And you can give your own opinion about law enforcement and say, oh, they killed an innocent black man. Oh my gosh. Okay. Who else is going to find out about murders, this and that? So it's just, yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it. Like I said, we cut through the chase, but basically it's just being organized. It's basically just a sense of, okay, this is what it's about. Anyway, I'm glad I read through that anyway, just to give y'all a good idea. Maybe I'll do some more reading on these things. I think maybe tomorrow, maybe I'll switch it up. I'll switch it up tomorrow. I'll see how things go. And I may read through some Juche. How would that sound to everybody? Oh yeah, the person left. Okay. I may read through some Juche tomorrow. How about that? I'll read through, let's see what I got on here. I got a lot of stuff. Abuses of socialism are intolerable. There we go. On the Juche idea. On the fundamentals of revolution. Yeah. So I'll pick one of those out and we'll read through that tomorrow, I think. I think that'll be a good idea. So anyway, folks, I appreciate y'all. for listening, and y'all have a good one. See you later. Bye bye.